Well, hey, Anthony, welcome to Good Movie Monday. It's fantastic to be chatting with you. How are you?
You too. I'm doing great. I'm assuming right now where you're at, it's the morning, and right now it's the evening for me.
Yeah, well, yes, and the time difference is always a problem when it comes to these things, but I'm so glad we pulled this together. This is great. Let's talk about Nix. This is a curious title. It's got a good amount of intrigue. Very cool story. I really enjoyed the hell out of this one.
Thank you.
For our listeners who don't know about it yet, how would you pitch it to them? How would you describe this film?
Well, I've always been a horror guy. I love horror, and my first few films were very horror driven until I went into Sharknado and went completely back crap crazy. I'd been looking for a long time for a horror film that we could do that had a little bit more meaning behind it, that a little more depth. And so I'd worked with James Barty, Skylar Caleb, and Woodrow Wilson Hancock III before on a film called Wake the Shadow Man. I was a producer on that and helped a little bit polish the script and get it to the finish line for them. And so they came to me with this project, and we started talking about it. And at the time, it was a different mythology, and COVID hit when we were about ready to shoot, and so we kind of tabled it and redeveloped the movie during COVID. And during that time, we started realizing that we need to dig deeper. We need to try harder to find a way to make something that resonated a little bit more, because there was a lot going on. And we talked a lot about stuff that's happened in our families, and we've watched people deal with grief and addiction and stuff. And it's like, well, what if we did something that people aren't expecting? And so I did a little research, dug around trying to find a really good mythology, and I came across the Nix, or the Knock-In, which is or Nixie, which is kind of a German folklore, which is half face and water. And I just was haunted by that image, and I became fascinated by it. Now, the mythology of the Nix, beyond that, it's a water fairy, so it's not that interesting beyond just that first initial look. But the other thing that intrigued me is that Nix in German means nothing. So, there's something about how we dismiss monsters and dismiss things that we don't quite understand. And so we worked hard on this story and came up with this movie about a family that horrible tragedy happens with this young girl when the family is three siblings, and one of them something happens to her, and the other two grow up and are completely messed up because of it, including the mom, who refuses to believe that the little girl is dead. And so it's about generational horror. It's about the things that we carry with us. And it's also about this creature that's there, always kind of looking over your shoulder and kind of is going to pounce and kind of destroy you in the process. I feel like Nix is kind of there's a kind of a trilogy of films going on in my filmography. My first film, Boo, there's a thriller I did called Forgotten Evil, and now Nix, to kind of deal with the mindscape a little bit. And I think I kind of perfected it with this movie in particular, because it definitely takes you on a mind journey. I've described it as Ordinary People meets Videodrome.
yeah.
So so it has a little bit of both. But at its core, it is a family indie family drama with horrific elements to it, and it takes you on a ride, and it has a very slow burn, which originally, since we were going to go with the practical creature throughout the film, I was going, oh, this probably end up kind of feeling a little more 80s when all is said and done. Not really specifically going for 80s, but just because we're not doing CG creature, we're doing something that's practical. But when it was over, kind of really what we were able to achieve in shooting in my hometown in Antioch with the Lynn House, which is the house that the Coyle family is at, and a lot of the other ambience. The movie has a very 70s feel, because it's not just the people that are haunted, it's the places they dwell in. And a lot of movies in the 70s kind of dealt with that. I watched The Exorcist again with my daughter, right before we were finished posting on Nix, and I'm going, oh, wow, there's a lot of interesting things in The Exorcist, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. And we all remember the possession stuff, but we forget about the stuff that leads up to it, and that sense of ominous dread in that house. And the house is a character in the film just as much as the devil and the possession and all that. And so I'm not saying our film's The Exorcist, but that vibe and that slow burn and creating characters out of places and things, I think, really aids in the journey of the film. It's a very unique movie, and I'm really proud of it. And since it was a true indie, We didn't really have, we knew as long as we delivered on the title, we had a creature, we had horror in it, people were going to be attracted to it. So that allowed us as an indie film to kind of take chances and big swings, which Jay and Skylar and Woodrow and I all talked about. That look, we know the movie has an audience, but let's take the audience on a bigger journey, and one that's something that maybe means something to us and it has a little more depth.
Yeah, see, perfectly said. That's why I ask the talents to explain their films, because you can never say it better yourself. And the thing is, like, you mentioned Boo, which I'm really glad you mentioned, and you also mentioned Sharknado. And this is important for me because I think people should know you are the legend that gave us all of the Sharknado movies. And for that, we thank you for sure. But
Thank you very much.
Nix is a very different film, and it's a real sort of, for me, it felt like a callback to Boo. And to hear you say this is part of a sort of a trilogy of sorts, that's exciting for me, and I need to go back and watch these in that context.
Well, yeah, and it's again, they're it's loosely connected. I mean,
Yeah,
I would say in the same way that Videodrome and Existenz and Crimes of the Future from
yeah,
Cronenberg all kind of exist in a similar palette.
like a thematic
There's
trilogy.
the thematic trilogy, what, because we ended up shooting in my hometown at a movie theater that I also shot my first film at, that had me doing a cameo watching a film I did when I was growing up in that town. The movie kind of took on sort of more of a personal thing, because we were originally going to shoot it in Los Angeles, where I live now. And when we shot there, there was just these added layers. It's actually Jay, I think, that added initially that the character would have a video camera, and then as we developed it, the camera became more part of it. So it wasn't a conscious decision to add that filmmaking element to it. But again, it kind of took on that feel. And then there's even some Easter eggs. In the theater, the projectionist is played by Dig Wayne, who played the cop Arlo Ray Baines in my first movie, Boo. And then there's a Boo poster in there, and on top of it, because the filmography of the character, he was a black exploitation star that became a cop and sucked at it. One of the titles of the Dynamite Jones movies on the marquee. So there's these little things that are there. But going back to your thing, yes, this is not Sharknado. And there was a lot of discussion. And do you promote this as the director of Sharknado? And I'm going, of course you promote the thing that I'm known for. But if you see the trailer, you clearly know this is not Sharknado. Just like with John Landis when he did Animal House, and then he went and did American Werewolf in London. Granted, that movie was funny as well as scary. They promoted it as from the director of Animal House, a different type of animal, and that's what we were trying to go for in this. So you don't want to hide from it, otherwise you just, oh, what is Nix? Oh, it's just another horror movie. And love it or hate it, people are going to make fun of the fact that, oh, the director of Sharknado, but we made a global franchise, and I think that this just is just another different thing in the resume and arsenal. And I think people forget that I did start off in horror. So I like the fact that Nix has that water texture to it, but it's nothing that anybody would ever expect.
Well,
It's a very dark, foreboding movie with I think probably, if there's any humor in it, it's probably that release in the horror, as opposed to hey, we're trying to make a joke.
yeah, for sure. And I promise you I'm going to move on from it after this question, but I have a special admiration for filmmakers that have risen up through the ranks of the Asylum. I think there's a discipline working in that sort of model and that company that the average moviegoer probably doesn't understand or comprehend. What skills did you take from working with them to this?
Well, I think there's the skills that I had before I came to the Asylum, which was on Boo and Horseman and all the other stuff that I did prior to that. And then when you get into the Asylum, what I really like about that company is it is the old Corman approach, where I'd worked with other companies developing things where they were afraid to take their budget and be ambitious. So they're going, oh, we can't afford to do that, so let's just put it on a bicycle. And then when you get to the Asylum, it's like, make it on a space shuttle. You got X amount of days and X amount of money, but if you can make it happen, then go for it. And I think that's what you kind of saw in the first Sharknado, where I was given more toys, which I call it, like, hey, I got a crane, I got this, I got more tools. And so I put everything into that movie because I didn't, I'd never had those kind of things on a movie before. And so they give you those opportunities in that toolkit to be able to push it to the limit and be resourceful. And especially on Sharknadoes, we had to think in the moment, because those movies were $200 million movies that we were doing for, probably $2 or $3 million tops. And they were hard to put together. Yet we filmed across the globe on Sharknado 5. We filmed at the Kennedy Space Center on number 4 in New York in the second movie. It was pretty crazy, the stuff that we managed to pull off on those films, and that was because we were resourceful. We were saying, this is what you have. How do you make it bigger? And so when it came to Nyx, which was a completely independent movie, it was that same aesthetic of, all right, well, if we shoot in LA, we're going to have less days, and it was during middle of COVID, so being able to shoot at someone's house was not on the table. But then we found in Antioch, I had open arms and a community that was going to allow me to film at all these different places, including the house. There is actually an art gallery called the Lynn Gallery, and it was an open during COVID, so we were able to bring in our own furniture and dress it and do some of the artwork and make it our house. And that's how we were able to be resourceful. I was able to shoot at my high school that I shot at, that I filmed another movie at. But in the script, the script was written very, when you do indie, you try to keep the locations very non-specific, because you don't want to get too attached to it. So once we started seeing what we could get, we have a high school. So now, instead of her working at this place, she now works at a high school. And instead of him working here, he works at a theater. We knew we needed the forest, and we found a place in Reading called Shingletown, which is about 3 hours away from where we were shooting in Antioch. And we ended up there. It was the last 4 days of shooting, or five, I think last 4 days of shooting. And the night before we started shooting, it snowed. We woke up to like 3 inches of snow in Northern California in February, which usually does not happen. So I think everybody else not accustomed to weather shifts like we had on Sharknado, we just kind of embraced it. I go, look, it's now part of the movie. Let's take the next 3 or 4 hours to regroup and figure out where we're going to start. And now snow is part of the movie. And I think that, the movie gods kind of really shined on us, as much as that was difficult to film in those conditions when we weren't prepared for it and didn't have, coats and gear and all that stuff. It gave the movie this sort of ethereal vibe to it that you could have only, if I wrote snow in there, it would have been like, sunny days for 5 days. Yeah. So I'm really proud of it. It gave us this even light. And, one of the rules you're told with creatures, and, I have that background with makeup effects, is never show your creature in broad daylight. And we broke that rule. Yep. And because of the even light in the snow, I mean, my favorite shot of the Nyx is the one where he's on the stump and we do that little slow push in, because he just sort of blends into the environment, and it's creepy and eerie and makes it all the more terrifying.
Absolutely. And what's it like to work with co-writers that are also actors in the film? Like, are they more precious about the material, or are they more willing to adapt to it with all these different changes you had to make?
Well, I think the thing that I give them credit for is that, we went down a path, and we realized we needed to push harder, and they gave me a lot of rope to hang myself with, because I came in and said, okay, if we're going to do this, if we're going to rethink this, then let me sit down and figure out how to do this, so we can get to the point. Because I had written an ending, because no one could figure out an ending originally. Mm-hmm. And I wrote this ending, and they go, we love this. And I go, well, then we have to throw everything else out. And they go, yeah. Okay. We talked about it, and we all agreed. Okay. So I took 6 weeks to I did a treatment. We all went back and forth on it. And then I did a first draft, and then we started working on it. And the collaborative process, we knew the key ingredients that we wanted, and they trusted me. Because again, some of the stuff that I proposed, I in my head knew it could work, but it's a hard sell to tell someone we're going to do this. And, as you've seen the movie, kind of the path the movie goes, and it gets really dark and really deranged. Yeah. But I've done these twisty movies before, so I give them a lot of credit for trusting me. There were days on set, and they even told me in post, like, we had no idea what the heck you were doing. We just had to trust you. And they were thrilled when they saw how it all came together. And but they were great collaborators, and we were all in it together. The four of us, were here from the beginning, or from the beginning when I came on board, because they had worked on it beforehand a little bit. But when we landed on Nyx, we were there. Every time we had a cut, every time we needed to talk about post, anytime we had to talk about promotion, we're still all very invested. It's a definitely a democracy where we all have a say. But it did take me like 4 months of editing on that film. I mean,
Wow.
I had a Cameron Ames who did the first assembly pass on it, and then I took it over and went in and dug into it. And I told him it was going to take some time because I had other movies that I was working on at the same time. So this was the labor of love. And I've been doing more editing on my films in the last few years, just because, it especially something like this, it's not an easy thing.
Mm.
And certainly the twisty nature of how everything connected was not something that someone could just kind of fully figure out. It comes from my demented brain.
Yeah.
But then I showed it to them, and like I said, they were like, they were shocked at how it all came together. I mean, in a good way. Like, I can't believe that this is what we did. This is so incredible. So yeah, again, kudos to them, and also just for putting the effort in. We all had something to prove on this. I needed to prove that, here's something that's completely different from Sharknado. They wanted to prove, what they were as actors and creators, and they came to it with shining colors. I mean, Jay has one of the hardest. James Zambardi, who plays Jack, has one of the hardest roles in the film, because with all the craziness, he is kind of the anchor, and he's the straight man. He's the guy that has to kind of hold it together and be the anchor and still be interesting. And that is so hard to do, because the inclination is everything's going crazy around you. You need to be crazy too. And he understood that, and he found that sweet spot. And he just the scene with him and talking to his dad is just it's a very powerful scene. It's just some really great little moments. And like I said, we made a movie for ourselves, and we hope that other people discover it and it resonates. I think the biggest compliment we got is someone said, a couple times, people going, that reminds me of my mom. And, this really meant something, because, I've been, going through something similar, not monsters watching you, but just how you deal with grief. And another thing too, is that there's a thought in the film, this idea of a loop, that people kind of get trapped in this kind of ongoing, memories, and they just can't get out of. They can't live their life because they're trapped in the past. And, it's a kind of a heavy concept to try to put into a horror movie without it being heavy-handed. And even with the addiction side of it, we didn't want the addiction thing to be a heavy-handed thing. I mean, there's certainly a version of this movie that is, what was that? The Darren Aronofsky movie, Requiem for a Dream. Is that what it is? Yeah. There's certainly a version of that movie, but then I don't think anybody could get through it. I don't think we wanted that.
Well,
I wanted to leave a little more mystery.
I think a lot of gratitude is owed to Dee Wallace. I think, is this the second film you've made with her?
It was third. It's the third film. She was in Boo. She was in Hansel and Gretel. And
yes.
And when we were rewriting this, in my head it was Dee. Honestly, the entire time, I wasn't. I didn't know if I was going to be able to get her, because usually when I bring her in, it's for a couple of days. So it's like this is a big commitment. And I called her up. I sent her the script, and I go, "You're the only one." And she read it, and it connected with her, and we worked it out. She came up and did it, and she wanted to do the movie without a lot of makeup. She really went to dark places. That scene in the upstairs toward the end of the movie, she wanted to kind of push things even darker. And I was like, initially going, "Are you sure you want to do that?" You're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "I'm trusting you. Let's go for it. Let's push this.
Yeah.
Let's make it dark." And so like I said, I think that there's echoes of things that maybe we've seen in the past in other movies, but ultimately it's its own little journey. I'm not sure how you felt about it, but I do feel like it's a movie where, when you watch a lot of genre movies, and there's some really great movies, I'm not disparaging anything, but for the most part, a good majority of genre movies, you see where it's starting, and you go, okay, I know where that's going, and you have a pretty good idea, especially if you love horror movies. When we were kind of having our premiere, and I was kind of watching the movie for the first time without having to look at, oh, is there a pixel here? Oh, there's a sound effect that's wrong. You're looking at it for everything that's wrong with it. You're not just watching it. So just kind of watching it through, I realized, wow, if you've never, if you don't know what's going to happen, if you haven't read about it, you do not know where this movie is going. It starts off and you go, I know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And it's like, huh? Wait, what's this? What is it doing? and it intrigues you, and so it rewards you for sticking around. And there's a lot of seeding there, so on second viewings, if people really like it and watch it again, they're going to catch a whole bunch of things. I mean, the movie has a mission from the beginning, and it sticks to the landing, but you don't know it until you kind of really put all the pieces together.
Definitely agree. It's a very unsuspecting film, and I feel like each of the acts, particularly the third, but also the second, have an element of surprise in there that, like you said, you think you know where it's going, and it definitely pulls the rug from underneath you, and it kind of makes you out to be the madman. Like, can we trust this director? Where the hell's he taking us? And I definitely thought that Dee Wallace's performance, she really digs deep into this one, and I think maybe that also, what you were saying earlier about having a 70s kind of feel to it, I think she has a lot to do with that as well. Like, it was a real classic performance.
The other thing too that I really am glad it worked out this way. I mean, we knew it at the script stage, and we knew when we were filming it, but to see it actually happen in when it's all together, is a movie is strangely emotional for a horror movie, it tugs at you. There are moments that are surprising, and again, a lot of horror movies want to go for that visceral, like, every character is messed up and horrible, but there's heart to this movie, even though horrible things happen. And I think that the biggest hat trick that we pulled off is we created a movie where you have empathy for characters that are just really messed up, as opposed to, oh, let's see them die. I mean, usually that's the go-to. I mean, go back to the movies of the late 70s and 80s. In Friday the 13th, the first 2 or 3 Friday the 13th movies, you really liked all those characters. They were very empty characters, but there was something about the performances, and you didn't want to see them die. And I think in here, you want to see these characters not go through this, because you really like them, and you don't want to see them go through this pain. And that's another thing that I'm really proud of, that we were able to bring that emotional depth. And that's a testament to the actors themselves as well, because this is a very tricky film and a very tricky dance without tipping the hat to what's really happening.
Yeah, there's very much that whole William Friedkin element of drama first, horror second. That's always how he described The Exorcist. Look, before I let you go, I wanted to sort of just touch on a question I ask a few people. As we mentioned, Boo was sort of, the movie that introduced you to us. I owned a video store that was on my shelf. It used to rent its ass off. But that makes me think, what kind of movies fueled your passion, like when you were young, teenage years? What inspired you to pursue this career?
Well, I've said this before. I started off wanting to make movies when I was in 6th grade, and it was just something, that epiphany. Like, everybody else is playing on the playground, and so what was I doing? I remember sitting, looking at the newspaper of the movies I was going to go see that weekend, and then I'm like, I want to make movies. And coming from a small town, there wasn't access. It wasn't like LA, where you can go 1 block and someone has a camera and you can go make a movie. Well, it could at the time, probably couldn't, but and so I started writing movie reviews, started learning about it that way, and then when I finally got a chance to make my own, it was big eye opener. But movies were important to me, and so I was able to convince the local theater chain, including the Campanelle that's in the film, the owners. They gave me a pass so I could see any movie I wanted, even when I was 11, movies I probably shouldn't have seen that were R-rated, but my mom was pretty liberal about that stuff. So I immersed myself in everything. Like, I was the horror. I loved horror, but because I had a pass, I could see everything. So, I mean, I saw things that that just gave me this broader scope of movie making that normally, might've been just myopic if I can only afford to go see the horror movie that came out that weekend. And so, I was always a big horror fan, loved the old Universal movies, later became a big fan of the Val Lewton films from the 40s and 50s, the Cat People, Chris the Cat People, the Leopard Man, and that sort of style. And then Carpenter, that whole Carpenter, Cronenberg, Craven, Landis, Dante kind of world, of just, that there was just a great time for interesting horror films. And those are the ones that actually strangely have held the test of time, even if they were kind of trashed at the time they came out, some of them. But I also love things like, one of my favorite movies is Diner by Barry Levinson. It was a film where you watch it and you go, this is a first film by a writer director that it's just all those actors are hungry and they're all natural. And I always feel, I always say I'm always chasing that vibe of Diner. And what I mean by that is trying to find that naturalism and realism, even if I'm doing a horror film, because I love what he achieved, where he had this conversational dialogue that didn't feel like it was scripted.
Yep.
And I try to get actors to not think sometimes and just be in that moment, so it does feel natural. One of the biggest compliments I ever got on a review of Sharknado was how they talked about the scene in the bar after the first shark attack, where they're just all hanging out, talking and joking, and you feel like they're real characters. And we kind of ad-libbed some of that stuff, and we kind of workshopped it just so it wasn't scripted. And that was kind of like the idea, because at that point, when you care about those characters, then everything that ridiculous that happens afterwards, you've fallen in love with them. And so when John Hurt dies in Sharknado, it's like, oh no, I didn't want him to die.
Yeah, that's right.
So those movies, it was always, there was always a lot of different things. I became a big fan of John Sayles because of Piranha and Alligator and I'll Be on the Stars. And then so I would follow him with his films, that he wrote and directed. Baby, It's You, a totally underrated movie, but because of those films, I went and wanted to see more of his stuff. Eight Men Out, Return of the Secaucus Seven, Brother from Another Planet. Later on, Lone Star, which is just an exceptional film and an exceptionally underrated film. So and Barry Levinson, because of Diner, I became a big fan of him. And obviously, you can't not disqualify someone like Spielberg, who was, with Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark and Close Encounters, these perfect films, that show you the joy of movie making. So basically, I was a kid who really, was, Quentin Tarantino had his video store. I had the movie theaters, and I rented a lot of stuff, and that was my world. And it was a thing of it takes you to another place, and it meant something to me, and it opened up my eyes to a lot of different things and cultures and people. And so what you try to do now as a filmmaker, you take from that is that you want to pay it forward, that somebody else is sitting in a town wanting to make movies or just needs something. Yep. And maybe Sharknado makes them smile, maybe Nix makes them have a realization, maybe someone just likes a good horror film. It's not all about trying to have trying to make a big statement. It's just about what do you give back to people. And if you've succeeded in reaching one person in any of those categories, even if it's just to make them feel good, then you've done your job as a filmmaker. And that's why I really like what I do. And one of the things I'm grateful for with the Sharknado franchise is that I really wanted to be the horror guy. I wanted to always do horror. And then Sharknado happened and opened up a door that I would have people going, this movie made me smile. It made me happy. And then it allowed me to do other films that I probably would have never had a chance to do. I've done some thrillers. I did a Christmas movie, and I have 2 Westerns coming up, Butch Cassidy movies, that I would have never gotten a chance to do that without Sharknado. So I think what I'm enjoying is that I got a pathway to become a filmmaker that can do different things, that has a major in horror and a minor in all these other little genres. Yep. And that if that one person, responds to it, then we got to win, because, that's what art is. And people forget that. It's not everybody hates your movie or bad reviews. It's like, no, it's that one person, just one person. If you make a difference, then you've succeeded.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said that better myself. The fact that your whole face lights up when you talk about those, Levinson and Dante and all these people makes you the perfect guest on our show, because that's the stuff that fuels our fire as well. But thank you so much for your time.
Well, that's one other thing is when I was doing the journalism thing, when I was writing articles, I managed to get the studios to get me into junkets, and I would sell those to my local paper. And then I realized I could talk to all my idols. So in a weird way, my second film school, and I went to San Francisco State, but I by doing these interviews, I got to interview all my idols. And so, when I did those interviews, and I still have them, and I want to publish some of them one of these days, I rewatched everything, and they were really, there wasn't, the geek in the room kind of like, oh my, like Chris Farley on Saturday Night Live. It's like, no, it was just like, when you did this, when you did that. And it was just, to have that connection. And then after my first movie, Carpenter, because I'd interviewed him so many times, actually reached out to me and said, great job. It was that meant so much to me. for all the stuff. It's like to have Carpenter at least acknowledge I made a movie and said something nice to me. That will always mean something.
Absolutely, and I know exactly how you feel. But thank you so much for taking the time.
You're very welcome.
It's great having you on. It's great talking about the film. Good luck with it, and good luck with these upcoming Butch Cassidy movies. Can't wait to get stuck into those.
Yeah, they're going to be fantastic. They're really going to be cool. Thank you so much.
Hey, honey. Looks like it might storm.
I think we'll be all right.
Dad, someone's watching us.
Hello? What are you doing over there?
Wait, Tessa! Tessa?
We celebrate Tessa's birthday because she's not here. And she's coming back.
She replays that day over and over again. She just won't accept that Tessa and your father are gone.
Do you ever hear voices?
What kind of voices?
Voices that aren't really there.
Something was out there.
I think people create monsters.
Did Tessa really disappear out here?
I saw it. I saw all of it.
It's not inside you yet.
This isn't nothing.
What the hell was that?
There are answers on this tape and out in the woods.
We're letting our imagination get the best of us.
I had another nightmare.
No, be afraid. It's nothing.